You've been giving pieces of yourself away for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to be whole. Every conversation, every crisis, every late-night phone call, you've become the emergency button in everyone's chaos, the lighthouse in their storms, the constant they can count on when their world falls apart. But who holds the light when your flame begins to flicker? You know this feeling, don't you? That quiet exhaustion that settles in your chest when you realize that your presence has become a utility, not a gift. You've trained others to expect your availability, your understanding, your endless capacity to absorb their pain and reflect back their comfort. And somewhere in this endless giving, you've disappeared. There's a sacred wound that opens when you finally recognize the pattern. It's the moment you understand that your worth has become entangled with your usefulness, your love measured by your willingness to sacrifice your peace for their temporary relief. You've become so skilled at reading the room and knowing exactly what others need to hear that you've forgotten the sound of your own voice, speaking your own truth. The philosopher Machiavelli once observed the delicate dance of power and perception, understanding that those who give too freely often find themselves exploited by those who take without gratitude. But tonight, in this quiet space between your thoughts and the world's demands, we're going to explore something deeper, the power that lies not in constant giving, but in the conscious choice to withdraw. This isn't about becoming cold or cruel. This is about recognizing that your silence, your absence, your refusal to immediately respond can be the most profound form of self-respect you'll ever practice. It's about understanding that the people who truly value you will wait for your words, while those who simply use you will reveal themselves through their impatience with your boundaries. You've been carrying everyone else's emotional weather, haven't you? Standing in their rain, sheltering them from their own storms, while your own soul grows weary from the constant exposure to others' chaos. But what if I told you that your withdrawal could be your salvation? What if the very act of stepping back could teach both you and them what your presence is truly worth? The people in your life have learned to depend on something that was never meant to be given so freely, your immediate emotional availability. They've become accustomed to your instant responses, your willingness to drop everything when they call, your ability to absorb their anxiety and transform it into calm. But this dependency, disguised as love, has created an illusion that feels real until you begin to examine it closely. Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist, understood that much of what we call love is actually projection. We see in others what we need them to be, rather than who they truly are. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." But what happens when you realize that others are irritated not by your true self, but by any deviation from the role they've assigned you? You've been living behind what Jung called the persona, a mask worn to meet others' expectations. Your persona has become so refined, so perfectly crafted to soothe and support, that even you have begun to mistake it for your authentic self. But beneath this carefully constructed identity lies someone whose needs, desires, and boundaries have been quietly suffocating. The relationships you've built on constant availability aren't relationships at all, they're arrangements. Contracts written in invisible ink that say, "I will be what you need, when you need it, and in return, you will need me." But need is not love. Dependency is not devotion. And the fear someone feels when you begin to withdraw reveals the true nature of what you thought was affection. Watch what happens when you don't immediately respond to that text. Notice the shift in energy when you're not instantly available to solve their crisis. Pay attention to how quickly concern turns to frustration when your attention isn't freely given. This isn't because they don't care about you. It's because they've become addicted to your emotional labor without ever considering what it costs you. The most profound relationships are built not on what we can extract from each other, but on what we can appreciate in each other's wholeness. When someone loves the complete you, including your need for space, your right to silence, your choice to prioritize your own peace, that love doesn't waver when you set boundaries. It deepens. But first, you must be willing to disappoint those who love only your usefulness. You must be willing to let them feel the absence of what they've taken for granted. Only then can you discover who remains when the utility is removed, who values the person beneath the service. There's a misunderstood power in the conscious choice to step back, to withdraw your energy from situations and people who have grown comfortable consuming it without reciprocation. This isn't the cold withdrawal of punishment or manipulation. This is the sacred act of reclaiming your psychic energy and redirecting it toward your own growth and healing. Jung spoke extensively about psychic energy, the finite resource that fuels our emotional and mental well-being. Every time you react immediately to others' chaos, every time you drop your own needs to tend to theirs, you're hemorrhaging this precious energy. You're scattering yourself across so many others' lives that there's little left for your own journey of becoming. Friedrich Nietzsche, that master of human psychology, understood that true freedom comes from the ability to master one's own impulses. He declared, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." For so long, you've been commanded by others' emotional needs, their crises, their demands for your immediate attention. But what if you chose to obey something deeper, your own need for peace, space, and sovereign choice over how you spend your energy? Withdrawal is not weakness. It's the recognition that your presence is valuable precisely because it can be absent. Your words carry weight because you don't waste them on every passing emotion or drama. Your attention becomes precious because it's not freely scattered to anyone who asks for it. When you begin to practice intentional emotional detachment, something profound shifts in the dynamics around you. People who have grown comfortable with your constant availability suddenly have to confront their own emotional states without using you as a stabilizing force. They must sit with their own anxiety, process their own disappointments, navigate their own chaos without immediately handing it to you to manage. This discomfort they feel isn't cruelty on your part, it's growth. It's the natural consequence of two people learning healthier ways to relate. They learn to value your presence because they experience your absence. They learn to solve their own problems because you're no longer solving them automatically. But perhaps most importantly, you learn something profound about yourself. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotional weather. You are not the cure for their loneliness, the solution to their problems, or the constant source of their stability. You are a whole person with your own inner world that deserves protection, cultivation, and respect. Silence is the most underestimated force in human relationships. Not the silence of passive aggression or emotional withdrawal as punishment, but the conscious choice to not react, not explain, not justify your every decision to those who feel entitled to your constant engagement. This silence creates a space that others must learn to navigate without using you as their emotional compass. Machiavelli understood that mystery and controlled distance often command more respect than constant availability. He observed that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But in the context of personal boundaries, this translates to something profound. It's better to be respected through your selective presence than taken for granted through your constant availability. When you stop explaining yourself, something shifts. The people who have grown comfortable interrogating your choices, questioning your decisions, or demanding justification for your boundaries, suddenly find themselves faced with a silence they cannot penetrate or control. Your refusal to engage in endless explanations forces them to confront their own need to control and understand every aspect of your inner world. This silence isn't empty. It's full of power reclaimed. Every moment you don't spend justifying your need for space is a moment you can spend actually experiencing that space. Every conversation you don't have about why you've changed is energy you can redirect toward actually changing. Every explanation you don't give about your boundaries is strength you can use to maintain them. People fear your silence because it removes their ability to predict and control your responses. They can no longer push certain buttons and expect certain reactions. They can no longer assume that their crisis will become your crisis, that their chaos will derail your peace, that their need for immediate attention will be automatically met. But here's what most people don't understand about silence. It's not the absence of communication. It's the presence of choice. When you speak, it's because you've chosen to speak, not because you've been compelled to react. When you engage, it's because the engagement serves your highest good, not because someone else's discomfort with your boundaries has forced you back into familiar patterns. Your silence teaches others that your words have value precisely because they're not given to every passing emotion or demand. Your presence becomes meaningful because it's not a given. Your attention becomes precious because it's consciously offered, not automatically expected. This is the silence of sovereignty, the quiet power of someone who has learned that not every question deserves an answer. Not every crisis deserves their energy, and not every person deserves access to their inner world. There's a death that must occur before any true rebirth, the death of who you thought you had to be loved. For so long, you've worn the identity of the helper, the fixer, the one who shows up no matter what. This identity felt noble, even necessary, but it was built on a foundation of fear. The fear that without your usefulness, you might not be wanted at all. When you begin to set boundaries, when you start choosing silence over immediate response, when you prioritize your own peace over others' comfort, something inside you might panic. There's a voice that whispers, what if they leave? What if they decide you're not worth the effort when you're not constantly available? What if the love you thought you had disappears when you stop earning it through endless giving? This voice is the old identity fighting for its survival. It's the part of you that learned, perhaps very early, that love was conditional, that you had to be useful, agreeable, constantly available to be worthy of care and attention. But this voice, however loud it may become, is not telling you the truth about your worth. Carl Jung wrote about the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming who you truly are, separate from the roles and expectations others have placed upon you. He understood that this process often begins in solitude, in the space between who you've been and who you're becoming. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, he observed, recognizing that this privilege often comes at the cost of disappointing those who preferred your false self. The collapse of your old identity might feel like a crisis, but it's actually a liberation. Every moment of discomfort you feel when you're not immediately responding to others' needs is a moment of growth. Every twinge of guilt when you choose your own peace over their chaos is evidence that you're breaking free from patterns that have kept you small and scattered. You're learning that you can be loved for who you are, not just for what you do. You're discovering that the people who truly matter will respect your boundaries rather than constantly test them. You're realizing that your worth doesn't depend on your willingness to sacrifice your own well-being for others' temporary comfort. This death of the old self is not a tragedy. It's a necessary sacrifice on the altar of authentic selfhood. What emerges from this collapse is not a diminished version of who you were, but the fullest expression of who you've always been beneath the roles and masks and endless giving. In a world that constantly demands your participation, your opinion, your immediate response to every situation, choosing solitude becomes a radical act of self-respect. This isn't the loneliness of isolation or rejection. This is the conscious choice to spend time with the most important person in your life, yourself. Nietzsche spoke of the Bermensch, the evolved human who has transcended the need for constant validation and approval from others. This isn't about superiority over others, but mastery over oneself. It's about becoming so comfortable with your own company, so secure in your own worth, that you no longer need others' constant presence or approval to feel complete. There's a profound difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is the ache of disconnection from others. Solitude is the joy of connection with yourself. When you choose solitude, you're not running from relationships. you're creating space for the most important relationship of all, the one you have with your own soul. In these quiet moments, away from the constant noise of others' needs and expectations, you begin to hear something you may have forgotten existed, your own voice. Not the voice that tells others what they want to hear, not the voice that smooths over conflicts or manages others' emotions, but the voice that speaks your truth, your desires, your dreams that have nothing to do with anyone else's approval. This solitude reveals something beautiful. You are fascinating company. Your thoughts, when not constantly interrupted by others' crises, can wander into territories you've never explored. Your creativity, when not constantly channeled into solving others' problems, can flow toward projects and dreams that feed your own soul. Your energy, when not constantly scattered across others' lives, can concentrate into something powerful and transformative. Like a lion walking away from the herd, not in defeat, but in awakening, you are learning that some journeys must be walked alone. Not because you don't value connection, but because you value yourself enough to create the space necessary for your own growth and evolution. The people who love you for who you truly are will understand this need for solitude. They won't take your need for space as rejection or punishment. They'll respect it as evidence of your depth, your commitment to growth, your refusal to live a scattered, reactive life. And those who can't understand your need for solitude, their discomfort reveals more about their dependence on you than it does about your need for independence from them. You've been living under invisible contracts agreements you never consciously signed but have been honoring for years. These contracts say things like, I will be available whenever you need me, and in return, you won't abandon me. I will absorb your negative emotions and reflect back positivity, and in return, you'll need me. I will sacrifice my peace for your comfort, and in return, you'll think I'm good and worthy of love. But tonight, we're going to examine these contracts and begin the process of breaking them, not through dramatic confrontation or explanation, but through the quiet revolution of changed behavior. When you stop automatically fulfilling your side of these unspoken agreements, something profound happens. The true nature of these relationships is revealed. Jung understood this dynamic when he wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These emotional contracts have been unconscious automatic patterns of giving and receiving that you've followed without question. But consciousness brings choice, and choice brings power. Emotional manipulation thrives on predictability. When others know exactly how you'll respond to their tactics, guilt, crisis, neediness, anger, they can use these responses to control your behavior. But when you become unpredictable, when your responses are no longer automatic, the manipulation loses its power. This doesn't mean becoming deliberately difficult or withholding. It means becoming conscious of your choices. It means pausing before you respond, asking yourself, is this response coming from love and wisdom, or from the old contract that says I must always be available, always understanding, always willing to sacrifice my peace for others' temporary comfort? When you break these contracts, some people will be confused. They'll wonder why you're not responding the way you used to, why you're not as immediately available, why you seem to have developed boundaries where none existed before. They may accuse you of changing, of becoming selfish, of not caring the way you used to. And they'll be right about one thing. You have changed. You've changed from someone who gave automatically to someone who gives consciously. You've changed from someone who was available by default to someone who chooses when and how to be present. You've changed from someone who feared disappointing others to someone who refuses to disappoint themselves. This change isn't a betrayal of who you are. It's a return to who you've always been beneath the patterns of endless giving and automatic availability. You are being reborn in the spaces between words, in the pauses before you respond, in the silence that follows when others expect immediate answers to their every need. This rebirth isn't happening despite the discomfort you might feel as you set boundaries. It's happening because of it. Every moment you choose your own peace over others' chaos is a moment of self-creation. Every time you resist the urge to immediately respond, immediately fix, immediately give, you're creating space for something new to emerge. The authentic self that has been waiting patiently beneath years of people-pleasing and emotional labor. The world begins to shift when you stop reacting and start becoming. People notice the change in your energy, even before they notice the change in your behavior. There's something different about someone who has reclaimed their power, who has learned that their presence is a gift rather than an obligation, who has discovered that their silence can be more powerful than their words. This transformation ripples outward in ways you might not expect. The people who truly love you begin to appreciate you more deeply when they can no longer take you for granted. Your relationships become more intentional, more reciprocal, more based on genuine connection rather than unconscious contracts and emotional dependency. And those who can't adjust to your new boundaries, their departure, while perhaps initially painful, creates space for relationships that honor your wholeness rather than exploit your willingness to give endlessly. You're learning that you don't have to earn love through constant availability. You don't have to prove your worth through endless giving. You don't have to sacrifice your peace to maintain relationships that require your suffering to survive. As you sit here in this quiet moment, perhaps in the late hours when the world has finally stopped demanding your attention, I want you to feel the power that exists in this silence. This is your power, the power to choose when to speak and when to remain quiet, when to engage and when to withdraw, when to give and when to preserve your energy for your own growth and healing. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when you're not performing the role of the helper, the fixer, the constantly available one? What part of you is waiting to be heard beneath the noise of others' expectations and demands? What would happen if you finally chose yourself fully? What would happen if you honored your own needs with the same dedication you've shown to others? What would happen if you let your silence speak louder than your words ever could? The answer to these questions lives in the space you create when you stop filling every moment with responses to others' needs. It lives in the sovereignty you claim when you choose solitude over constant availability. It lives in the power you discover when you realize that your worth doesn't depend on your willingness to sacrifice your peace for others' comfort. You are not responsible for managing everyone else's emotional weather. You are responsible for tending your own inner garden, for protecting your own peace, for honoring your own journey of becoming. The silence you've been learning to embrace isn't empty. It's full of possibility. It's full of the person you're becoming when you're not busy being what everyone else needs you to be. It's full of the power that comes from choosing yourself again and again until that choice becomes as natural as breathing. This is your invitation to step into that power, to embrace that silence, to honor the profound act of choosing yourself. Not because you don't care about others, but because you finally learned to care about yourself with the same intensity you've shown to everyone else. The world needs more people who have learned this lesson, people who give from overflow rather than emptiness, who love from wholeness rather than need, who show up as themselves rather than as whatever others require them to be. You are becoming that person. In the silence, in the space, in the conscious choice to honor your own worth, you are becoming exactly who you were always meant to be.